I really wanted to create a space that said where you are and who you are right now is the most important thing. Like, that's important. That should be celebrated. That should have a place of sanctuary and honor. My name is Vashti DuBois. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director and the founder of the Colored Girls Museum. Colored Girls Museum will celebrate her 10th birthday, September 15th of 2025.
It's a space where someone like me can see people and beautiful, breathtaking artwork that's reflective of people that look like me.
My name is Ariadne DuBois. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the program manager here at the Colored Girls Museum. So I grew up in this house. I'm Vashti's oldest daughter. I was here during the creation of the museum and have been helping it along in and out.
My relationship to this space that I'm in right now is one of wonderment and awe. Every time that I come to the museum, it's like coming to church. It really is.
The Colored Girls Museum is a wonderful place because you have these feelings. Like, you, for example, you know that young Black girls are adultified early in life. You feel it as growing up as a young Black girl, but you didn't have a vocabulary for it. And I think what Vashti did was put a vocabulary and gave words to feelings that many of us have been having. The museum gives you the space and the freedom and the protection to be who we want to be as individuals, as well as in the space of being a Black woman.
Yes, these voices matter, and they are beautiful.
What we celebrate is ordinary Black women and girls with a focus on Black girlhood. We hope that that art is in conversation with you when you come to the Colored Girls Museum.
I feel like we've created a safe haven for Black women and girls that didn't exist before.
If this museum had existed when I was a young girl, it would have manifested very boldly for me this concept of you matter and that you are beautiful.
I wanted my daughter, my granddaughter, all colored girls to have this sense that the world is yours.
Thank you, Vashti.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and great thanks to the Ujima family for having me here this evening. I'm really, curious about your questions, so I want to leave enough time for that. I'm glad we were able to show the video. It's almost like starting a book in the middle, showing that video, but hopefully it gives you a sense of, of place and purpose. I actually wanted to start before I talk about me. I wanted to know if you could do, those of you who are online and the folks that are in the chat, there are a couple of things I'd like to start with. So I just want to ask you to take a moment, if you would, to identify an object of significance to you that you have on your person or around you, and just jot down what that is. And I'm going to give you like a minute. What is it? Why is it important? It doesn't have to be deep, just something that is significant to you. And remember why. If you're on Zoom, feel free to like put your object in the chat and say why. Okay. Thank you. Like an object, not something that you like to do, but like an object. So in my case, for the purposes of this moment, it might be this ring. which is significant to me because I got it when I was in Venice a couple of years ago while we were still in the pandemic. Um, and it reminds me of that trip where I saw some of the most beautiful work from around the world, but specifically from African countries. Just exquisite. Thank you. The next question I want to ask you, and again, if you're online, just because we'll be able to see it and talk about it eventually, I would love for each of you to just take a moment, if you would, to write down your definition of wealth. Wealth. Your definition of wealth. Not Webster's, but like yours. When you hear the word wealth, what does that mean to you? How do you define it for yourself? And again, bullet points, there's no wrong answer. I'm just really curious and also wanting to bring us into this moment where we're talking about economics and finances and money. And how do you define wealth for yourself? Mhm. Mhm. And the last question, now that you've defined wealth for yourself, um, what are some ways and or instances in which you have experienced wealth as you define it? So now that you've defined wealth for yourself, if you could, what are some ways in which you have experienced wealth as you just defined it? I'm going to give you one more minute and then we're going to come together. Hmm. Okay, we're back. I'm wondering if I can just get a few volunteers to share with us. There's work in the chat, and I can read some of them, but there's some folks in the room or online who just want to share their answer to any of the prompts I just gave you. Any three of them, or all of them.
Vashti, we have one person in person. Would you like to be on camera?
Sure, that's fine, yeah.
All right.
Hi, all. Again, Brandy Brooks, and I love this question because I feel like it's something I've been thinking about for a couple decades. Like, what does it really mean to, you know, or really sort of the reverse question. It's like if you don't have any money, but you actually have everything that you need and have the ability to easily get all the things that you need to live, are you actually poor? And, you know, like that was sort of the inquiry. And so for me, you know, when I define, I don't love the word wealth, but I tend to think more around abundance. But it's similar to what a lot of people have put in the chat. It's this idea of like you have everything that you need and you can access it easily. I tend, the way we use wealth in our society, I tend to associate it a lot more with excess, which I don't like. There's a way that you can go from abundance to just like excess and hoarding, which is how I think what I think wealthy looks like in our society. In answer to the last question, I feel like I've been doing a lot of reflecting in my life on the fact that I'm actually living a life of quite a great deal of abundance, you know, relationally, materially, in terms of the love and care I'm surrounded with, in terms of having a safe home that's very comfortable for me. So it's just been a good time for me, I think, to reground in the abundance that I'm surrounded with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Can I invite anyone else to share any of the three, an object that was that's significant to you, your definition of wealth? Again, not Webster's, but how you would define it for yourself. Um, and then when you've had the experience of it. So any of or all three. Somebody,
Tamashi.
go ahead.
Tamashi has their hand raised.
Okay, Tamashi.
Okay, Vashti. Um, my name is Tamashi, and a Solidarity member, Ujima. I'm going to go for the wealth question. I'm going to go back to my answer so I don't say more. I think wealth may mean an abundance or reserve of resources to support myself and to share. And that can mean in relationships or as currency, as tradable currency. And an experience of wealth, I'm in one right now. I live in Massachusetts. I grew up in California, but I live in Massachusetts. Not really in regular contact with my family of origin that much, but I'm here for work in California, and I touched down and a friend came and picked me up from the airport. It's like an $80 car ride from SFO to Oakland. Somebody picked me up from the airport. I called her literally before I deplaned, and she came and got me. And now in this room that is hosted by yet another friend who's cooking food in the next room. So I feel like I'm in wealth in relationship and in love, even more than currency.
That's that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? No pressure, but I just wanted to set the table with the question. And so then I have a last question before I share something, and please again feel free to jump in. Um, how did the series of these questions make you feel? Because language is interesting, right? So, you know, I'm curious about especially the language, using the language of wealth, using that particular word. Did that have an impact on some of you? Was it hard to think about the question when I said wealth? And if so, like, can you share with us why or how? It was for me. Do you know why?
I think money scares me.
Hmm.
Like I'm identifying trauma around money, and being a Ujima solidarity member soothes that quite a bit, like re helps me unlearn negative associations and like problematics with money. But I grew up with a mother who worked an hourly wage, and then joined a union and did well, but was never taught to manage money well. Like there was always like chaos around money. Like either we were flush or there was like just a lot of worry. Um, and so when you asked that question, I felt like immature for a moment, because I was like, I'm kind of like sitting with recently that I really don't know what's going on. But I want to. Like I don't feel empowered. I don't feel insecure, but I don't feel empowered because of my own negative associations with money. So yeah. But then when I thought about it as a relationship wealth, then it felt less what's the word, intimidating.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else have a thought? And I do see some things in the chat. It reminded me that I focus too much on finances, currency. We have someone in person. Yes. Where art thou? Someone in person.
Hi,
Yes.
Donna. I've always said that my greatest wealth is that I knew all four of my grandparents. I didn't lose my first grandparent until I was 17 years old. And I lost my last one in the 90s when I was in my 40s. So that grounding, spiritual grounding is wealth. And I get disconnected from it sometimes, but that's my wealth.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Donna. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to talk, much of it means power and influence. I had to move from my head to my heart to get more of a true answer. Grew up with a lot of stress around money, wealth, what I owe minus what I own. Also think a lot of inheritance and legacy and access to people to ride for you so you can access more wealth. So I want you to know that I intentionally use the language of wealth because I know that that the word wealth can be like a sort of a brain freeze for many of us. It certainly has in the past been for me. And the reason I asked the questions in the order that I did, like, what do you have this significant that's on you that you would talk about, is because I think that the things that we care about are an expression of our wealth, the things that are significant to us. This is an expression of wealth. Defining wealth for ourselves, so not someone else's definition of wealth. When I met my late husband almost 30 years ago, there was, for both of us, we were both artists, so there wasn't a lot of money. And I used to say to him, you are such a wealthy man. And that wealth is actually not yet reflected in your bank account in that kind of currency, but oh my God, what a wealthy human being you are, because he was powerful spiritually. He was a really talented musician. He was a good friend. He was a good father. He was an incredible human being. And when I think about my relationship to wealth, which I define as different from money. And I want us all, I'm imagining like what happens when we all think, like Donna shared with us, it's incredible, especially for Black folks, to be able to actually say, I knew all of my grandparents. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a young filmmaker who was able to talk about four generations of her Black family from Alabama going back, which I had never heard such a thing before. I can only go back as far as my grandmother and my grandfather. I don't know who was before them. And knowing where you come from, knowing who your people are, knowing where you are in the world is such a powerful, in my view, expression of our wealth. I'm going to pull back a little bit and just tell you a little bit about me and then come back to this. So I am, in that too long bio, I have been in the nonprofit world for well over 30 years. And prior to that, well, actually, there was no prior. I wanted to do good things in the world, like probably many of you do. And, when I heard about quote unquote nonprofits, that seemed to be the place that all the people who wanted to change the world, that's where you went and you got your job and you figured out like how, whether it was teaching literacy or whether in my case, and you should know, those of you especially who are in Boston, I lived in Boston for 3 years, and my first job in Boston was at Madison Park CDC. I was actually teaching job readiness training there. And then I went from Madison Park CDC to Haymarket People's Fund, where I worked as a fundraiser. And in between those jobs, I was invited by Donna, actually, onto the board of the Women's Theological Center in Boston. And I mentioned those three things because I moved to Boston from Philadelphia. And I didn't want to come to Boston because all I'd heard about Boston was how racist it was. But I had a classmate from Wesleyan who lived in Boston, and she was tired of hearing about, and I was a single mother at the time. I think I was 35. And she was tired of hearing about my inability to get a job that paid me enough money to be able to take care of myself and my daughter. So when I said, I can't move to Boston because it's racist, she said, well, you can't stay in Philly because you're broke. So so my daughter and I packed us up and I moved to Boston. And within 2 weeks of being in Boston, I was offered a job at the CDC teaching job readiness training. I won't be able to talk about everything I would love to talk about, but I do want to share this because I'm hoping that it's a story that has a tool in it, I think. So I had taught one of my passions is working with Black women and girls. And the job readiness training project that I was on was working with women who were returning to the workforce. So we had to teach a module, and that module was on budgeting. And it was unlike other modules that I had used in the past to teach budgeting and the job readiness training, because it asked me to do something that I'd never done before and that frankly didn't make any sense to me. It gave you all the things that, your expenses, they break out all the expenses that you could possibly have, rent, lights, gas, entertainment, transportation, all those things. And it asked you to fill in the number, but it was very clear that you couldn't fill in the number based on how much money you made. You had to create this budget based on what you really needed, not what you had to work with. And that was so confusing for me. I was like, well, what is the point of putting in, because I'm sitting there with my bills, right? And I have to pay something on all of them, but I can't pay everything on any of them. So why would I put in to this module what I need when I know I don't have what I need? But that's what the module calls for. What do you need? Right? So I fill in all the little things, and when I get to the end and I tally my number, I'm blown away by how much less I have to work with than what I need to live on. And I am in my mid-30s, and it's the first time in my life that I'm in a space where I'm like, oh, okay. So like I I can't pay all my bills, not because I am disorganized and a poor planner and not able to, like, I can't pay all my bills because I actually don't make enough money at all, not even close. So that I took that module into my class, all women, and they had the same experience with the module. They were like, "This is stupid, Vashti. Like, I have access to this much money. It doesn't make sense to, like, what good is it for me to know how much I don't have?" And I said, let's just do it. So everybody does it, and everybody has the same experience I have. And so they ask, it's a very good question, what is the point of this exercise? And I said, the point for me, the breakthrough for me, is that I now am not ashamed of myself. Because now I actually get it. I decided to go into a field of work that doesn't pay me enough to live. I've been, at that point, I'd been in it for at least 15 years, and I'd never made enough money. So I said, for all of us here, right, we go and we try to get these jobs, and what we're doing is trying to, like, match up, of course, our skill set with whatever the thing is that's out there. The people offer us whatever they're going to offer us, and we take it or we don't take it. But we're flying by the seat of our pants because if we don't know how much we need to live on, then it becomes almost impossible to create the world that you want for yourself. Just knowing is really, really powerful. At least it was powerful for me. 3 months later, I got an interview with the Haymarket People's Fund to be a fundraiser. I go to Haymarket People's Fund. I have a great interview, and Haymarket People's Fund, this is the Haymarket in Philadelphia. This is the lead foundation. There's several all over the country. Here in Philadelphia, it's Bread and Roses. And the foundation was started by young folks with inherited wealth who wanted to do good things in the world. They started donor advised funds. The Haymarket People's Fund does 2 conferences a year. They're called wealth conferences, where they recruit and organize other people with wealth to really think about how they can use their wealth in a way that is potentially world changing. And so this is the job that I applied for. And I remember sitting in the interview and asking, like, well, I'm not really sure why an organization like this is necessary. And the executive director said, a lot of people with inherited wealth are actually really ashamed of their inherited wealth. And what Haymarket has done is created a safe space for people to be in conversation about this. And I said, well, they don't need to feel guilty. I can introduce them to all the people I know who don't have any wealth at all, right? And they can just give those, like, I don't understand, right, what the problem is here. Like, there's an easy solution. And I'm going to come back to that because they offered me a salary. And for the first time in my life, somebody made me an offer, and I knew it wasn't going to be enough because I had done this other work. So I was able to say yes to the offer, but I can't do it for what you're offering. And here's the thing. I think I'm going to love this job. I think I'm going to be really, really good at this job. I don't want to do what I've done in the past and have to have 10 other jobs in order to, like, do this one thing that I really want to do. I want to be able to have the experience of being really good at something really committed to something, really focused on something, and having the resources I need to do so. And so for the first time in my life, I got a livable wage and real benefits. And I don't, that's a specific thing assigned to like a job. But what I want, what I'm hoping we can think about is what happens broadly beyond money when we actually have an understanding of what it is that we need to have the experience of wealth. And wealth, as I define it, is knowing that I have everything that I need to create what I want to create. That's my definition of wealth. I have everything I need to create what I want to create in the world, right? Which brings me to the Color Girls Museum and what I hope is helpful about my journey around money. I've never had money in my view, but I have always been wealthy. I've always had my spiritual wealth. I've always had my intellectual wealth. I've always had my creative wealth, and I was never unaware of it. But what I was unaware of was its value. Because for my entire life, what people told me was valuable was the currency. If I didn't have the currency, then I didn't have anything. But the fact is, when you know what you have, that, currency is it's another energy system. It's another resource, but it's not finite, right? Like I have been able to leverage my creative wealth, my spiritual wealth, my emotional intelligence to, for the first time in the last 10 years of my life, begin to imagine and then create for myself the world that I want. So that exercise that I did many years ago around that module didn't stop at me understanding how much money, currency I needed, but what did I actually need in order to be able to think straight? Because if you're worried about how you're going to get things done, you can't be creative. You can't think about how the relationships you have are actually resources. You can't think about how the family that you have is actually a way through. So this is the last thing I want to share, because I think it's going to be more valuable to then ask questions. But the Color Girls Museum celebrated her 10th birthday in September of 2025. I did not set out to create a museum in my house. I am a theater artist. Before this, I was, executive director of a literacy cafe. Like this just never occurred to me as something that I would do. But after the death of my husband, I kind of fell back on something that I love to do, which is theater. And to just bring myself some ease, a break from the grief, I decided to do a show about a house that wanted to dress up as a Colored Girls Museum. A show about a house. I never said, oh, I'm going to turn my house into a museum. That was the furthest thing from my mind. And when I did that show, this house, now known as the Colored Girls Museum, was in foreclosure. Because when my husband died, he had just declared bankruptcy so that we could get a loan modification, all this other stuff. And the house was in his name. So there was a long path. So here I am doing a show about a house, right? So this is just me using something that I have to care for myself. So really imply in this way, sort of connecting with my creative self as a source of the spiritual and emotional wealth that I needed at that time. And what happened is that people kept coming. And so at some point I said to myself, if I can figure out how to take my gift as a theater artist, as somebody who has a passion for working with Black women and girls, as somebody who's passionate about the economic stability of Black women and girls, because I do believe that Black women and girls are the economic anchors in the Black community, not by choice, but just by history. After enslavement, they would not hire Black men to do work. So Black women went back to doing the work that we were doing when we were enslaved, which was like housekeeping, right? Laundry, cooking, cleaning, taking care of other people's kids. But that actually created wealth in our community because that work allowed us to build our first churches, our schools, keep food on the table, send people to school. Like, and it was this modest thing. But it also allowed us to be able to purchase land and build our homes. And once we started doing that, then we were able to imagine other things. Again, working with what we had, right? So now we've got the home, right? And we're doing this other work for other people. But then once we have a space of our own, we're able to do other things. We're able to think, oh, maybe I can, I can take care of other people's kids, right? When I'm not taking care of somebody else's. I can let people live in my house and pay a sum or exchange or barter. But all once you had something to work with, which is what I was thinking about as I was building out this idea of like, what if I could take my situation, foreclosure and all, and teach myself how to bring myself, how to use the gifts I have to create what I want in the world. Because I have clearly this is a piece of wealth because people keep coming to this thing. And over the next 10 years, that has been the work that I've been doing. When people talk about the museum, they talk about the art, they talk about the sanctuary. It's a beautiful space, it's a deeply spiritual place. But a big part of what I wanted to create was something where you could actually look at it and look at my journey and see that it was not magical, that I had a house that was in foreclosure, but I was still in the house. So as long as I was in the house, I could figure out how I could save the house. Now, it turns out that the way, it took 4 years for me to be able to access resources that did come to us as a result of my husband's accident. That allowed me to pay off the house so that now this is no longer a debt that I have to carry. But in that time period, all I was doing was actually generating resources from the sale of tickets, t-shirts, and then partnerships with universities and other people to really use myself as the guinea pig for can you create, as my sister-in-law said, she said, you don't have anything, so how are you going to create something from nothing? Well, we all have something. So we all have the thing that we need to create something from. And people will tell us that that's not enough, right? That, I remember someone said to me, you give from your overflow, not from your reserve. Many of you may have had the experience that I had where you think of your reserve as your overflow because you're not used to having anything that isn't already accounted for. But what I want to offer as a thought that we could have collectively is what would happen if we unhooked this idea of wealth building from money and thought more broadly about what it is that we actually have, not just as individuals, but as family members, as community members, right? Because the other way we were able to create more at the Colored Girls Museum is because I realized that the real wealth that Black people have always had and been able to tap into is community. And when you really start moving in that way, you realize you don't have to have everything, but you may have this person may have that, and somebody else may have that. And it's the combination of all these things that creates the possibility of creating the world that you want to be in. Now I know that was all over the place, so I don't know what you were able to follow. Um, but I really wanted to leave some time for questions. And I also have to move this because this computer looks like it wants to die. So does anybody have like clarifying questions? How do we feel that in our gut and move in it? I can tell you how I did. I I have to say I kind of felt like I didn't really have a choice. Um, I had to, there's a scene I always joke about, from what is that movie that comes out every Easter? Um, where Moses parts the water.
The Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments. So, he arrives at the water and he's got all these people behind him. And I always jokingly say to people, yeah, God said to Moses, like, Moses was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? And God said, what's in your hand? And, Moses went to shrug and the water parted, right? So what he had in his hand was a stick. For me, all I had, that was all I thought I had. Well, I had this house and I knew that I had it.
And
Did we lose our speaker? Okay.
what is
Were
this
you
shuffling
finished,
and
Basha?
singing?
I know there was a little bit of confusion, I think, here online because we have a member team meeting starting, and so some people went into breakout rooms. But it
Okay.
seemed like you were midstream, Vashti. Were you midstream?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you continue? And I was actually just about to put into the chat. we we've technically run out of time, but I
Yeah.
want to invite everyone, if you have questions, please, please, please put them in the chat so that we
Yes.
could at least register them. And then Vashti, what I do definitely want to invite you to complete answering this question, and then we do want to properly close out our workshop and thank you and all that good stuff. But I'll invite you to
All
to
right.
finish your
Well,
thoughts.
all I'm going to say is that I think how do we go from like a headspace to like what do I really have? I think part of it for me was actually turning down the noise of what people told me I didn't have so that I could actually take an inventory of what I had to work with and then begin to work with what I was actually in my view. But it took a while to untether myself from other people's definitions. And someone said this in the beginning, right? If your definition of wealth, for example, is given to you by somebody else, then it's always going to be something that you feel like is you're chasing. For me, understanding that the wealth is what I carry around with me, it's my history, it's everything that I already have. That has been the thing that I've been investing in over these last 10 years. And that's how I've been growing my wealth. And when I talk about my wealth, like I said, that means creating the world that I want to be in. And I'm so sorry we ran over.
Oh no, no, don't apologize. Thank you, Vashti. And I'm sitting here thinking we just got started. And so I'm thinking this is part one. So perhaps Vashti, we might want to think about a part two, that goes into that kind of continues this, at least part of this conversation, as well as what you may not have been able to get to today, just because the time is so short. We started this knowing it's not enough time. We had
Yeah.
two previous sessions where we knew there was not enough time. So I think one lesson for those of us who didn't know this already is this topic requires quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you so much, Vashti, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And we're seeing in the chat, yes, to another session. So we're gonna work on that. So just a heads up, Vashti, you'll be hearing from us. But
Okay.
if we can unmute, clap, cheer. We can do it with the emojis. Gia, we can unmute in the room so we can hear that as well. Just to truly, truly thank you, Vashti. And again, before we exit it, if you have questions that you want Vashti to consider later or feedback, responses, please put them in the chat so that we can capture them. And I'll just read one out loud right now. Oh yeah, listen to that. I'll read one right now where it says so provocative and evocative.
Thank you.
Mind
Thank you.
Forget about it.
Yes, and
Thank
wave.
you.
More, please. More, please.
And
Thank you.
this is the moment. Thank you so much where we
Thank
do our
you.
non-awkward goodbyes. And